it launches the Americans' bloodiest fight yet in the hedgerows of Normandy. While sidelined, General George S. Patton battles to win back his command. American tankers and infantry must improvise or die. Patton returns from exile just in time for the biggest carpet bombing mission in military history. Can he deliver the death blow? Or will Hitler's army survive to fight another day? General George S. Patton. His bold attacks are legendary. See the war as he saw it and ride along with his hard-fighting troops as they battle their way through World War II. On this 360-degree battlefield, Patton's enemies could be anywhere and everywhere. There's nowhere to run when the war is all around. Patton 360, American Blitzkrieg. July 24th, 1944, Normandy, France. 7 weeks after D-Day, the Allies are still battling for inches. The only thing that can dislodge the Germans is a full-blown campaign of shock and awe. Squadron after squadron of American bombers and fighter bombers take off from various airfields in Normandy and England. It's day one of Operation Cobra, the largest single carpet bombing mission in military history. In 7 weeks, the Allies have only moved 10 miles inland. Cobra is designed to provide an opening near the town of St. Lo to break the stalemate.
All of these strategic bombers would fly into an area, a very small strike zone, and they would obliterate that strike zone with every bomb they could carry.
Target, German infantry, armor, and artillery batteries that have stopped the Allies cold in Normandy. Strategy, pulverize the German positions, then pour through the opening to break out of Normandy. Tactics, 3,000 bombers and fighter bombers will destroy a 3-mile-wide position near St. Lo. 2 Massachusetts tankers, Tony D'Arpino and Don Knapp from the 712th Tank Battalion, watch from below as the American air power crosses the front lines.
I thought it was midnight. There were so many planes up in the air that it was dark, and the ground was just actually shaking.
And I can remember I was with my new guys and all these bombers coming over. I thought, boy, this is going to be big.
Since the D-Day landings 48 days ago, the Allies are getting desperate. The Americans have taken over 20,000 casualties in Normandy. Anchoring the Armada are squadrons of B-17 heavy bombers. The Flying Fortress has a flight range of 1,100 miles when fully loaded, with 6.5 tons of high explosive and fragmentation bombs. Its firepower is the equivalent of 100 howitzers. Just west of St. Lo, the first bombers dropped their bombs through gaps in the heavy clouds.
They were dropping everything but the kitchen sink.
The Germans respond. On the ground, General Omar Bradley is tense. He commands the American First Army in France, and this is his grand plan to jumpstart the invasion of Europe. Failure is not an option. At his headquarters in Normandy, a frustrated General George Patton paces like a caged lion. He's been held out of the war for nearly a year. A disciplinary action for an incident during the Sicily campaign, and now he's itching to get back in the fight. Patton is excluded from the initial Cobra planning. Patton used to be Bradley's boss, but now the tables have turned.
Patton almost feels cheated in Operation Cobra. He sees Omar Bradley showing up at his headquarters, showing him the plan and asking him advice. And Patton's getting down on his hands and knees on large maps and making corrections and giving advice, and feels it's almost his operation.
1 p.m. The bombers must have good visibility in order to hit their target, but the cloud cover is suffocating.
There was no precision bombing in World War II. You had to see the target to hit it.
Reluctantly, Bradley calls off the attack. But one squadron doesn't get the message in time. The result is tragic. Bombs rip through the 30th Infantry Division. Men scramble to take cover while an ammo dump erupts in a fireball.
It's hard to imagine what the effect of, of being on the receiving end of that kind of, a bombing effort, and knowing that it's friendly fire.
The friendly fire kills 29 GIs and wounds another 145. Compounding this terrible tragedy, Bradley may now have lost the element of surprise. The breakout is in jeopardy. Since Bradley was Patton's subordinate in North Africa and Sicily, most assumed that Patton, not Bradley, would command the Normandy invasion. But that was before old Blood and Guts made two monumental mistakes. Flashback. Sicily, 1943. Riding high in the late stages of his stunning victories in Sicily, General Patton slaps two American soldiers suffering from battle fatigue.
This is a court-martial offense, what Patton has done, slapping a soldier. And he realizes that he must do whatever he can to keep himself out of falling into the backwater of the war.
Under intense pressure, General Eisenhower relieves him of his command. For months, Patton lives in isolation on Sicily.
In his heart, he kind of wavers. Sometimes he believes he's still destined for great things.
January 11th, 1944. Even without a command, Patton still likes to visit the front. He's walking along a ridgeline in Italy when he stops to take a photograph. Suddenly, an incoming German artillery round explodes close by, spraying shell fragments in all directions. The general doesn't receive a scratch.
And Patton sees this as another sign from God or divine providence that he's destined for greater things during World War II.
January 22nd, 1944. The wait is over. Despite immense pressure from Washington to demote Patton, Eisenhower needs his cold-blooded battlefield skills for the invasion of Europe. But when Patton arrives in Britain, he's ordered to lead part of a mission called Operation Fortitude.
Patton is the commander of what's called the 1st Army Group. This is a fictitious army that is going to decoy the Germans into believing the Americans and the British are going to attack at Pas-de-Calais, further up the coast of France.
Because he was such a large figure, and because the Germans knew who he was, and because the Germans feared him, frankly.
The Fortitude deception pays off during the greatest amphibious landing in history. June 6, 1944, D-Day. Thousands of GIs land on Utah and Omaha beaches, staining the sand red with blood. Allied casualties exceed 10,000 in a single day. And Patton can do nothing to help.
So here you have Patton, the most experienced amphibious army commander and a soldier who knows the battlefield, and he's left out of the planning. It's a big mistake that the Allies make, failing to utilize Patton's knowledge and experience.
A warrior's fate is the subject of his June 16th diary entry. I have horrible feelings that the fighting will be over before I get in, but know this is not so, as destiny means me to be in. The fighting in Normandy drags on. The Germans are dug in to one of the most diabolical natural defenses in the world. In French, the word is bocage, meaning hedgerow. Centuries ago, Norman farmers built steep embankments and grew hedges on top to mark their fields and fence in cattle.
Just like a jungle. When you got into a hedgerow, you could see one hedgerow, but you didn't know what was in the next one.
Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, Patton's adversary in North Africa, is the cunning architect of the bocage defenses. Backing him up are 3 divisions of 12,000 Fallschirmjäger, or paratroopers.
These were some of the best soldiers in the German military. The Fallschirmjägers were considered the best of the best.
The men who will soon join Patton's army are in a fight to the death to prove they are better than Hitler's best. June 6th, Normandy, France. The Allies pay a high price on D-Day, but the sacrifices purchase a crucial toehold in Europe. The Battle of Normandy is on. But after 1 month of bloody stalemate, the Americans advance just 10 miles. Something must be done to uproot Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's tenacious defenders. July 6th, a plane secretly lands in Normandy, carrying General George Patton. He's preparing to storm France with his Third Army. His impromptu speech on the beachhead serves notice that Old Blood and Guts is back in action. I'm proud to be here to fight with you. Now let's cut the guts out of those Krauts and get the hell on to Berlin. And when we get to Berlin,
I'm personally gonna shoot that paper-hanging goddamn son of a bitch like I would a snake.
one American president said seeing Patton there was like watching Babe Ruth striding up to the plate. Patton is held out of the Battle of Normandy, but his reputation alone saves untold Allied lives. His command of Operation Fortitude, the ruse to keep Hitler thinking the main Allied invasion is coming at Calais, is a stunning success.
A lot of historians say that, oh, Hitler slept late for D-Day. Well, Hitler woke up on time, really, but decided for days and weeks after to keep his 15th Army in Pas-de-Calais, waiting for Patton's invasion.
Even with Hitler's 15th Army stuck in Calais, the Germans in Normandy turned the diabolical hedgerow country to their advantage.
It's really becoming a slaughterhouse for the Americans.
The main roads are zeroed in with the dreaded German 88mm artillery gun. The 88 is also mounted on a force of Tiger tanks that lie in wait.
This was the most feared tank on the modern battlefield at that time. You see a Tiger coming, you get the hell out of the way.
The 88 versus the Sherman tank's 75mm is a mismatch from hell, as Patton's future tankers discover.
Theirs was about that diameter, and theirs was yay like this, and it was bang, zick, flat, and it's there. People would get out that could, but lots of times you did have time to get out before the flames got real bad.
Tankers who try to go over the hedges expose the thin underbelly armor to the German Panzerfaust. handheld Panzerfaust is triggered with a black powder charge. The 6-pound oversized warhead contains a shaped charge of explosives that ignites and burns on contact.
The joke was, don't try to catch one of them footballs because they come at you slow and hit the tank and burn its way through.
It is the grandfather, if you will, of the RPG, the rocket-propelled grenade.
As Patton waits to enter the fight, the thick hedgerows continue to frustrate the Americans. But thanks to Curtis Cullen, a recon sergeant from New Jersey, the tankers suddenly get a new tool. It's called the Cullen Cutter.
What if we took some of the steel that we see from the beaches that was used by the Germans for beach obstacles, and let's weld that onto the front of our tanks so that we can basically force our way through the bocage.
And you put it in low gear and just plow right through.
Tankers and infantrymen use the cutter to clean out the hedgerows, one at a time. A Sherman begins by breaching the hedge. Before German machine guns can tear into the infantry with a hail of lead, the tank's gunner immediately pumps high explosive shells into the opposite corners, where the Germans position their machine guns. Then the infantry picks off anti-tank weapons and enemy riflemen, while the Sherman sprays machine gun rounds in support. For the tankers, the most effective German weapon is no bigger than a dinner plate. The teller mine, also called the mushroom, is the most common. The small steel case is easily buried. When a tank rolls over its flat pressure plate, a fuse detonates 12 pounds of TNT.
The teller mine destroyed a tank at its weakest spot from the belly. The track, the support roller section of the track, enough to immobilize that tank.
Tank driver Tony Darpino knows just how dangerous a teller mine can be.
There was this big field, and I could see like a pasture, looked like grazing ground. And there was a gate, and the gate was open.
As Darpino approaches the gate, the hatches on his tank are closed. This provides protection from enemy bullets and shrapnel, but also makes mine blasts more deadly since the concussion can't escape from the tank interior. The crew doesn't notice a dead sheep hanging in a tree, the victim of a nearby mine. But Darpino's commander suddenly orders the crew to open all hatches.
I think he had a premonition that there was something there. I think it's the only thing that saved our life because the concussion came in and went out the open hatches.
Darpino's tank is totaled, both his eardrums punctured, but he's alive, and so is the rest of his crew. But tomorrow promises more bloody fighting in the deadly bocage country. July 14th, Normandy. The slow and bloody fighting rages on, field by field. The Allies have been unable to make much progress since the D-Day landings more than a month earlier.
The Germans have been settled here for quite a while, and they know the layout of the ground. They've zeroed in all the territory for artillery, for mortars. The Americans are broaching new territory. They are green troops, and they're catching fire for every yard that they take.
The days are also dragging on in agony for General Patton as he helplessly waits for the go order from General Bradley. Patton's diary steams with resentment. Brad says he will put me in as soon as he can, Patton writes. He could do it now with much benefit to himself if he had any backbone. Of course, Monty does not want me, as he fears I will steal the show, which I will. The key to the breakout from Normandy for Patton and the men who will soon be under his command is the town of St. Lo, less than 20 miles inland.
The Germans realize that if the Americans can break out of the St. Lo area, they're going to have open field running.
But before St. Lo can be taken, fortified positions to the northwest must be cleared. And the key to securing the flank for the attack on St. Lo is Mount Castre, also known as Hill 122. It's the anchor along a fortified front the Germans call the Malman Line, and a regiment of the 5th Fallschirmjäger defends it with orders to hold at any cost.
The Krauts had that, and they could see everything we were doing. We got to get them off of there because their observers were up there.
The fight begins on July 3rd. Units from the 90th Infantry Division, soon to be under Patton's command, arrive near the base of Hill 122, under constant mortar and artillery fire. 26-year-old Major Orwin Talbot, a college graduate who'd committed to an Army career long before Pearl Harbor, commands a battalion of the 359th Regiment.
We got up to the foot of it. Our company was all by itself for a while. We were counterattacked rather heavily by the Germans, but we held our position.
By July 6th, Talbot's unit fights its way up the hill. But then, they and another battalion get cut off by a fierce German counterattack.
And they were out of ammunition, out of water, out of everything.
4 tanks from A Company, 712th Tank Battalion, soon to fight under General Patton, attempt to reach the cut-off battalion.
They got the supplies all right, and then they got ambushed. Lieutenant Flowers' tank was hit, and one of his feet got blown off. He didn't know it until he tried to get out of the tank, and he fell down inside. When they finally got out, the tank was on fire. The ones that did get out were badly burnt.
All 4 tanks and 9 men of A Company are lost. Just north of A Company, the fight for Hill 122 rages on in the town of Bocage. The 357th Regiment attacks the enemy. They fire 6,000 rounds of 81mm mortars in 2 days, fending off 14 different counterattacks.
The battalion at Bocage fought for 5 days. The Germans refused to give up, and there was a lot of hand-to-hand fighting.
On the western flank, the surrounded units have been fighting off attacks for more than 24 hours. The Germans demand that they surrender, but the GIs aren't giving up the Great View.
There's no way the Americans are giving up Hill 122. I mean, you want to take Normandy, you got to control the high ground.
We were repeatedly attacked up there for a while, but held our position. With, again, more casualties.
After 30 hours, Talbot and the surrounded units are finally relieved by their fellow battalions in the 90th Infantry Division. In the 10-day battle, the 90th takes 7,000 casualties. Just a few days later, on July 17th, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, Patton's adversary from North Africa, is gravely injured after an Allied fighter strafes his staff car. He's evacuated to Germany, leaving the German 7th Army in chaos. Then, on July 20th, the day the Americans capture the town of St. Lo, German conspirators attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler.
He narrowly missed being killed. After that, he was paranoid even more. He didn't trust almost any of his officers, and anyone in the Wehrmacht he looked at with suspicion.
He takes full command of battlefield operations in France, and the German army is about to pay for it in blood. July 25th, 1944, Normandy. Day one of the failed Operation Cobra bombings caused 174 American casualties. But today, the weather is clear, and General Omar Bradley unleashes the air attack again.
The ground shook all day long. The ground vibrated with the bombs that were being dropped.
More than 4,700 tons of bombs fall in 2 hours. Into the firestorm, P-47 fighter bombers deliver a cruel new weapon, napalm. Napalm bombs contain different types of acids that mix with aviation gasoline to produce an incendiary jelly. On impact, the napalm ignites and spreads out, clinging to and burning everything it touches. Then, as German positions are battered, a tragic mistake repeats.
These guys came in kind of lower and very intimate, and I was thinking, boy, I hope they don't have any shorts.
The shorts are misplaced bombs, and they again rock some of the same 30th Infantry Division units that were hit the previous day. Shocked GIs and even high-ranking officers are killed, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. He is later identified only by the 3 stars on his lapel. The miscommunication during the second Cobra bombings kills 111 Americans. Another 490 are wounded. But the attack must continue.
We had the feeling, wow, we're finally going to get going. You know, it's finally going to happen.
As Patton is forced to stand by, it's up to Omar Bradley to seize the moment. 11:15 a.m., 2 infantry regiments are ordered to attack. But what they find is a complete shock. July 25th, 1944, Normandy, France, 11:15 a.m. The Operation Cobra carpet bombing unloads more than 9 million pounds of bombs on German positions near the town of St. Lo. But as the Americans advance, the Germans open up on them.
At first, Operation Cobra is considered a failure. The American infantrymen begin advancing, they encounter resistance. What they don't realize is this resistance has no backup. This is a hollow shell of a German army that is down to its last men.
After weeks of battling for inches, American tanks are finally rolling through liberated French towns.
The nice part of the war, going through small towns and they're sprinkling flowers and girls climbing on their tank with bottles of wine, and I thought, this is better than the hedgerows.
July 28th, 1944. The wait is over for General George S. Patton. He gets the green light to leapfrog Bradley's First Army with his fast-moving armored divisions. For the first time in almost a year, he's back in the fight.
When the Third Army was activated, it was like a breath of fresh air. Patton was back, and nothing was going to stop him now.
Old Blood and Guts is ordered to capture the Brittany ports of St. Malo, Brest, and Lorient. Patton, being Patton, disagrees with Bradley and Eisenhower's plan. He believes attacking the ports to the west is pointless when the unglued German army to the east is ripe for a slaughter.
Patton, just balled up inside as he is about this decision, does not open his mouth. He's been in the doghouse for too long. He is not going to risk his career on what to him seems like an elementary military maneuver.
Instead, he sucks it up and turns loose his pit bull on Brittany. General John Wood commands the 4th Armored Division. He's so aggressive, his men call him Tiger Jack. Some say he can out-Patton Patton. One of Wood's boys is B Company Commander, 37th Tank Battalion, Captain Jimmy Leach. He will soon help lead the 4th Armored's charge across France.
He referred to us as my boys, and he not unusual for him to hug his troops. He was a big man himself, and he would just grab a guy like me, 5'7" or 8, and hug us. And hell, our head is on his chest, he's that big.
Wood immediately leads the charge. Like Patton, he disagrees with the order to attack west, but unlike Patton, he doesn't fear for his job. Patton's August 4th diary refers to his hard-charging division leader. Wood got bullheaded, Patton writes, and turned east after passing Rennes, and we had to turn him back on his objectives, which are Vannes and Lorient, but his overenthusiasm wasted a day. As Patton's men speed around Rennes, Leach's B Company tanks run into a deadly roadblock.
As we approached into the edge of Rennes down this road, there was a huge anti-aircraft dirt mound that the Germans had built and had actual 88s on the top of it.
The 4th is moving so fast, the Germans are caught napping. But 4 deadly 88 guns are locked and loaded.
So we just fired at these guys as we drove by. Well, in the meantime, these Germans are running like hell to climb up on this gun position to man their guns.
Then, the trailing 35th Tank Battalion tries to take the gun emplacement head on. But the 88s have the high ground and take out 9 Shermans in no time flat. New 4th Armored units arrive, and the German guns are overwhelmed with a barrage of 75mm shells. As Patton's troops move toward the port of Lorient, the defenses stiffen. The ports throughout Brittany are heavily defended. Patton won't tolerate a loser, as he reveals in an August 5th letter to his wife, Beatrice. Now we are in the biggest battle I have ever fought, and it is going fine, except at one town we have failed to take. I am going there in a minute to kick someone's ass. August 6th, Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge commands what's left of the German army in France. Von Kluge is a steady, level-headed commander and realizes the troops are in poor condition. The situation is desperate, and he wants to withdraw. But Hitler runs the show now. He orders von Kluge to attack.
Hitler comes up with a plan. He's going to strike Avranches. This is the key point. This is where the American forces are flooding into the continent.
With the German 15th Army still falling for the Fortitude ruse in Calais, the limping 7th Army must pull off a Hail Mary. The plan is to strike Avranches through the town of Mortagne, just 12 miles to the west. 4 panzer divisions attack from the east, surrounding a high ridge. The Americans call it Hill 314.
They take the town. There's still a small handful of Americans at this very top peak looking down on the valley as the German armored forces move forward. The Americans on this peak do not even have bazookas. They don't even have artillery. They are simply riflemen. But what they have is a radio.
The radio belongs to Forward Artillery Observer Lieutenant Robert Weiss, attached to the 2nd Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment. He uses it to call in constant artillery strikes on the advancing German divisions.
Lieutenant Weiss's men were basically just stuffing the Germans' counterattack and delaying them.
4 miles from the German attackers, the 230th Field Artillery Battalion unleashes a fiery hailstorm. Supplies are running low for the 2nd Battalion. Even the radio batteries are dying. And the German fire just keeps coming.
I can't imagine a man being in the position he was in, being anything but a hero.
10 miles to the east, Sergeant Fred Cottrell's 737th Tank Battalion is speeding south through Avranches when it's ordered off the road. General Patton plans a rescue attempt of the lost battalion on Hill 314.
Our orders were to get there and do it at whatever cost.
German anti-tank guns are ready for the 737th tanks.
At the line of departure, the first tank to move out got hit immediately. We were told if the tank in front of you gets hit, you don't stop. Push it out of the way if you have to. I guess the hardest thing about it was to pass your friends up with the tanks on fire and not being able to stop and help them. We were not allowed to stop.
If the lost battalion is going to survive, every second counts. General Patton's Third Army is fighting in 3 directions, and the German army in northern France is shredded. But Hitler refuses to cut and run. August 10th, 1944, day 4 of the fighting at Mortain, France. Field Marshal von Kluge's 4 panzer divisions are attempting to retake the town of Avranches from the American First Army and eventually cut Patton's Third Army in 2. High above the town of Mortain on Hill 314, Lieutenant Robert Weiss is directing artillery fire on the Germans with the lost battalion, but his situation is critical.
This handful of soldiers on top of Mortain are desperate for water, for food, for anything they can get their hands on. In an effort to resupply them, the Americans start putting plasma and supplies in artillery shells and firing it at the mountain. This actually proves ineffective.
Sergeant Fred Cottrell commands a tank from the 737th Tank Battalion. His mission? Rescue the lost battalion on Hill 314. 54 tanks with supporting infantry attack near Mortain. But 11 Shermans are knocked out in the first hour.
We traded tank for anti-tank gun. The anti-tank gun would get the one tank, and then the next tank would get the anti-tank gun.
By day's end, Patton's men reach the base of Hill 314. The next morning, the tanks and infantry charge up.
We were able to get the anti-tank guns and the pillbox of the machine gun so that the infantry could move. They were a very special unit.
After 6 days, the 320th Infantry finally breaks through to the lost battalion. Lieutenant Weiss called in 193 fire missions while trapped on Hill 314, stopping the Germans cold at Mortain. August 8th. While the battle for Hill 314 rages on, east of Mortain, General Patton's 15th Corps is attacking the town of Le Mans. Racing toward Le Mans is Tony d'Arpino, He survived Normandy and will serve under Patton until the end. Today, he's driving the lead tank for the 712th near a crossroads when all hell breaks loose.
You could see coming down the whole German column. And the first vehicle in the column was a German motorcycle with a sidecar, and he had a couple of branches sticking out. You know? And Lombardi said, "Run the son of a bitch over. Turn right and run the son of a bitch over."
Foot soldiers riding on D'Arpino's tanks take out the motorcycle. A dip in the road prevents the Germans from targeting D'Arpino's tank.
I can still see that motorcycle upside down with the wheels going a mile a minute. And Klapkowski, our gunner, knocked out every vehicle that he could see. And then he took a chance that the road was straight. And he raised the gunner here and fired around, raised another here, fired another round.
The tactic starts a chain reaction of destruction.
Flames all over the place, ammunition going off, and then I heard that Klapkowski ran out of something on one tank and he jumped on the other and was shooting the .50 caliber at all the troops he could see. He was that kind of a nut.
Then, in the skies overhead, P-47s join the fight. Fighter bombers annihilate the rest of the column. For taking out more than 30 German vehicles, D'Arpino receives the Bronze Star. Corporal Stanley Klapkowski, the Silver Star. Le Mans easily falls to Patton, but much of his Third Army is still stuck in Brittany, while most of the enemy is back to the east. Patton finally convinces Bradley to relieve his hard-charging armored divisions and get them in the fight to the east.
Patton is running amok in France. These armored divisions are just flanking the German army and going at will through French towns.
In a letter, Patton confides with his wife on the prospect of imminent victory. He writes, "I am the only one who realizes how little the enemy can do. He is finished. We may end this in 10 days. Patton's optimism is centered on a narrow valley between the towns of Argentan and Falaise. This valley is the only route of escape for the German 7th Army.
You have an entire German army almost surrounded. And if you can cut it off and destroy it, you've basically won the war.
While Patton's 3rd Army is swinging north to Alencon, the British and Canadians are attacking south toward Falaise. As Patton races to close the gap and annihilate the Germans, General Bradley orders him to halt.
He gets cold feet just as the opportunity presents itself. Patton thinks this is ridiculous. There's an open flank in the German army that can be closed.
Omar Bradley wants to prevent friendly fire casualties between the two armies. Privately, he thinks Patton's forces could be destroyed in a counterattack. Patton's August 15th diary entry captures his outrage at Bradley's decision. His motto seems to be, in case of doubt, halt. I am complying with his order, and by tomorrow I can probably persuade him to let me advance. I wish I were Supreme Commander. Despite his frustration, Patton decides not to challenge Bradley. He doesn't intend to lose his command a second time. Even so, Patton wonders if the glorious destiny he envisions for himself is disappearing in the dust of the escaping German 7th Army.